Purpose.
Hello, welcome to Youth of Purpose, a show that is here to give you a platform as a young person to be able to put a brick in making sure that Uganda becomes a better country. And how do we do that? We need to keep safe and making sure that we live responsibly as young people. And that involves also making sure that we keep our nature and the environment that keeps us living. And today we want to be looking at the issue of climate change. And as young people, what is our contribution? But also, this issue of climate change, which surely has become a global issue, is it the big issue that Africa should be discussing today? We've had a climate change summit in Kenya, Nairobi, just of recent, where different countries came up to discuss how climate change can be mitigated. And the issues that were coming up were, is really climate change the biggest issue that Africans should be concerned about? But also to remind you that out of the 20 most affected countries by climate change, 17 are from Africa. So that definitely shows you that Africa kind of needs to really care about climate change. And if we talk about the countries, for example, that are most affected by hunger, which is caused by climate change effects, talk about drought, talk about floods, definitely Africa is most affected. And today I want to be looking at that and what can we be able to do to make sure that we mitigate all those climate change issues. And with me, I have young people, well-informed, knowledgeable, to be able to help us to deliberate on this issue. Immediate on my left is Richard. Richard, welcome to Youth of Purpose.
Thank you, Ivan.
Kindly say hello to the viewer.
Friends out there, everyone in your own capacity, thank you for having gotten this time to be with us. I'm happy to be with you.
And next to Richard is Patience. Patience, welcome to Youth of Purpose. Say hello to the viewer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ivan. My name is Bako Patience, and I'm a forester by profession and a climate activist at the same time, and I'm very delighted to be in this space sharing today.
Great. Nimrod, say hello to the viewer.
Thank you, Ivan. It's always a pleasure to speak my views to countrymen and women, but mostly the young people. Greetings, and I thank you all. Whatever you're doing in your capacities out there. It's good being here today. Yeah.
Thank you. Starting with you, Richard, the issue of climate change. Really, for the common person, what's about climate change?
Well, I would first and foremost feel sorry for those who are most affected by the climate change, most especially our friends from the eastern part of Uganda, and friends from Malawi, friends from Pakistan, and those who have been affected by different actions by climate change. Sorry. Well, I would want to first define the word climate change. It's something we do not, most especially people at the grassroots, we do not put into consideration because we think it's useless to us, but it's most especially affecting us. Climate change is a long-term shifts in temperature or weather patterns. So I think it's our personal responsibility, each and everyone out there, to take up the action towards this catastrophe.
Great. I'll be coming back to you, Richard. Coming to you, a forester with a background of forestry, Patricia. In your own perspective, what is climate change?
In my own perspective, climate change is just a variation in weather patterns, and we have seen examples like variation in rainfall. We have also seen floods occurring. We have also seen droughts occurring. That's part of the weather. The weather changing like drastically over time. Yeah, that's climate change to me. And climate change is also something that could really impact your life socially and economically, and some scenarios could also impact it politically, especially in situations where it causes conflict in regions that are facing severe problems of food insecurity, maybe water shortage, could result into such scenarios. And you find yourself being impacted in one way or the other.
Thank you so much. Nimrod, your perspective, one, on climate change, but also my question is climate change the issue that is, affecting us as Africans most, that it should be given the attention it is being given today?
Thank you, Ivan. I've been attentively listening to my friends here, trying to explain to us what's climate change. And I've just said it correctly. Climate change is change in variations of the weather and temperatures and all that. It hurts me so much that as Africans, we are being eluded and neo-colonized in a very modern way now. And we are deliberately, as young people, going to be the most affected. I think if there's a better way of explaining climate change, I think we should also have a perspective of how does it come and they use it to colonize us, mostly the young people in Africa. Is it the most affecting thing in Africa? I mean, in the world, to me, is no, definitely no. Does it deserve the priority we are giving it? Definitely not. I mean, this is obvious. Let me give you some practical examples here. Why am I saying that climate change, to me, in Africa is not the most urgent thing we should be discussing right now? The world today is speaking about Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. It's moving to the fifth industrial revolution. Africa as a continent, we are still largely having LDCs, MDCs, but most importantly, we are still struggling with subsistence farming, which is basically the first industrial revolution. That we are not even at the smallest, I mean, we are not even closer to what the world is talking about. So if the world that is speaking about climate change is in the fifth industrial revolution, what is Africa that is still struggling with the first industrial revolution in that discussion? For example, people I mean, if it was food on a dining table, if for you're just learning how to eat, why are you going to struggle with meat that is given on the dining table? You don't have the teeth. So Africa as a continent, we are still struggling with the first industrial revolution. I don't think we have space, or we should even avail space to discuss about climate change that is mostly advocated by people in the fifth industrial revolution. Why am I, let me just get this done. Why am I saying that? Give you a practical example. Europe as a continent was developed at the cost of the environment. Today, every individual in Europe annually emits carbon that's worth 10 tons annually. Africa as a continent, we are just struggling to reach 1 single ton per capita in carbon emissions annually. How can we now compare and discuss these issues when this country has 10 tons that is emitting the environment and I have 1 single ton and I'm not developed? So I think they don't deserve the priority that we give them.
I think, one, do you have to first wait for the problem to become worse, or actually to get to the problem for you to solve it? Then another one, from the introduction I told you, out of the 20 countries that are most affected by climate change, 17 are from Africa. So if you say Africa's problem right now, what is affecting Africans most is not climate change, and it shouldn't be given the priority, I don't understand you.
Thank you. Let me now give you more practical examples. You see, those are also statistics that we should get clear. If you say that among the 20 most affected countries that are affecting the world by climate change, 17 are from Africa, what is this? How is it so strong in terms of affecting? Europe, in the last 98 years, Europe has suffered the effect of climate change in terms of maternal death, or in terms of death of around 2 million people. Africa, the whole continent, in the last 98 years, we have not even reached 200,000 people who have died as a result of climate change. So as much as we have 17 countries that are highly affected by the climate change, but today, this morning, I was seeing on CNN, Greece is having floods, and how many are they killing? And how many are dying in Africa?
We've been seeing the wildfires.
So exactly, how many are in Africa? Secondly, why am I saying that we need to first explore and use our resources before now we can sit and say, how do we adapt to these issues of climate change? Uganda now, getting back to locally, in Busia here, the recovery of gold in Busia is estimated at $10 trillion. That is a world economy. We are running it. But yesterday, when I saw some misled African young people with placards in Nairobi talking that we should not exploit our resources because the emissions will affect our environment. And I'm like, look, How do we want even to go to a point of not understand this small thing that we must use our resources as Africans? I mean, I was an advocate of ECOP. I was on these roads of Kampala saying that we must explore our oil. And also there are some few fellow Africans who says, no, 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 we cannot continue with ECOP because it has a bigger environmental impact. But at the same time, these Europeans were funding the same pipeline in Norway, actually much higher than us, that we meet.
Amazing. I'll be right back to you. Coming to you,
can
Richard.
I deliberate add on?
Just a moment, you add on. Coming to you, Richard. The issue of climate change versus energy and economic development for Africa. What is your take in as far as the impact that we are having? One, the question will be, is the impact we are having on climate change because of the deeds of African countries or because of the deeds of the other countries? Because we might be having the impact, but then we are not the cause of the problem. What is the issue? How do you balance the issue of climate change to make sure that still Africa can be able to exploit its resources to develop economically?
I would like to maybe borrow his point that he said about young people standing out and then says stop ECOP and so forth and blah blah, and then Greece was also in the process of doing its oil pipeline in line with the oil. And I remember very well that even the Total itself, the company which is supporting ECOP in terms of funding, is also from France and is from Europe. So Ivan, I want us to go to a line where we need to harmonize both the activists, the government, I mean the officials or the decision makers, and the stakeholders. How can we live in harmony? How can we live with this? And I believe at a certain point, we know as Africa, he said we don't even, most especially Uganda, we don't even emit 1%. And he said that out there in Europe, some people are individually even emitting 10 tons of greenhouse emissions. So one ton. So I would, me myself, think that we need development. At the same time, we need to reverse the climate change itself, because if we are now facing these issues within the the climate change, and it's definitely saying the long-term shifts in temperature. So I would think that on the other side, we need to sit and then find ways, sit and then reason. Let us not be misled in the other side, and let us not be misled in this side. So it's more of understanding and probably come up with a very good direction in that. Me, I think I would live in a way that we want development, and as Africa, most especially as Uganda.
Just Richard, as he continues submissions, okay. Just ask him as he continues. Yeah. Why do we protect the environment?
Probably.
Why do we struggle for climate? Why do we advocate for climate change and all this?
So one of the things we need to look at, we need to look for tomorrow. Like, you need to ask yourself, what will happen to your generation or your children and the children of your children if we exploit this?
Sustainability.
Yes. At the same time, we need to look at what is happening in Europe. You could move like some good kilometers, and then you don't find a very indigenous tree that is planted or that is being in
short,
place.
We shouldn't be making the mistakes that Europe has made.
Yes.
We can do better because we still have the chance to.
But before you come in,
yes,
we need to balance the two. We need to look at the climate change, and we need to look at the development. Because at the end of the day, we are really struggling with the biggest number. When you look at Uganda, is the second country with the youngest population, yes, and it's the second growing country in population after Namibia. So we need to think about this. And when you look at the Commonwealth, where I'm a representative, you see 1.5 billions of young people between the age of 18 to 29. And when you look at globally, when you look at the age of 18 years to 24, 1.2. So we need to think about this
that population,
which is very
I get you. The issue here that I see is that definitely there is a conflict of climate change, development, and sustainability.
Can-
But I need to bring you in. You needed to
Yeah,
give a comment as we go in
I-
for a break. Just give a comment. You wanted to give a
Okay,
comment on
the
what
comment
Nimrod,
the
had
comment I
submitted.
wanted to give is that climate change does not necessarily mean that we shouldn't develop, and also we have to understand that climate change is just a given component in the environment, and it's something that has come, and we have to evolve, adapt, and thrive in it. So climate change at some point can also be an opportunity for us African youth to realize or to harness our potentials, because climate change is telling us to consider environment in anything that's developmental, have sustainable development, yeah, prioritize. That's why when you want to, and does not stop us from utilizing our natural resources. That's why when you're going to maybe excavate something and you're going to use it, maybe add value, you have to be in position. You have to know, is it going to impact the environment and in which way? So, and you also have to come up with maybe solutions to mitigate those impacts. Now, if it's carbon, maybe if your activities are going to emit carbon, you have to come up with other measures that are going to offset the carbon you're going to emit. Maybe if your activities are going to maybe release chemicals or something, you have to also come up with measures.
Amazing, amazing. We'll be coming to that. We need to go in for a break. When we come, I'll be coming back with you to be able to still let us know on how we can be able to balance the two. To have development but also put climate in consideration. Let's go in for a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Youth of Purpose, a show that is here to give you a platform, basically you as a young person, to also be able to contribute to what happens here in our country, Uganda. My name is Ivan Tumukonde. I still have Richard, I have Patience, and I have Nimrod. And we are talking about the issue of climate change. Is it a priority that we should be able to focus on as Africa or not? And before we went in for a break, Patience was trying to break for us how we can be able to balance the two to make sure that we handle the issue of climate change. Patience, basically, is it possible to balance the two, that you're going to put climate change in consideration, at the same time have development, the same way we saw, for example, Europe fighting ECOP here? At the same time, they were funding projects on their side. At the same time, we call upon these guys to do funding on climate change, but they never commit. They talk, they support climate change mitigation, but when it comes to the issue of realizing the commitments, they don't.
The point we have reached, climate change and development are two elements that are inevitable, and they're now intertwined, in that you can't have development, sustainable development, without looking into aspects of climate change and aspects of trying to build resilience and adapt to the situations. For instance, we can see what happened with the River Katonga, where the bridges were built to sustain the extreme weather events. So in the face of climate change, it tells us that when we are going to do something, we should look at the long-term goal. So how are we going to adapt? What if we built maybe infrastructures that could withstand these extreme weather events, maybe extreme water flow, maybe heavy rains? And also, in the context of development, we also look at climate change, giving opportunities, employment opportunities for the youth. We can see youth going into developing models for green infrastructure, youth coming into the innovation world, coming up with brilliant ideas of how they can try to reduce their emissions, bringing in unique products every day that are going to make our lives much simpler. So when we talk about climate change and development, we look at doing activities that are really going to reduce our carbon footprint, and shouldn't really be something that's totally bad we should worry about. I think it's an opportunity for us to showcase our abilities, and also an opportunity for a young person to do something that's going to influence or change lives of the people.
So what are your comments on activists that do the campaign government programs on development, backing up their issue with climate change?
I think there's one thing that has not been clear, especially the way we disseminate information about climate change. Most times we just tend to talk about, things that we read, and we don't try to conceptualize or try to break it into ways that are simpler. And when you tell maybe like any person who has never studied climate change in class, like the way I did, it's something that's really very complicated. That's why I come to a point sometimes I be like, I think instead of maybe generalizing everything as climate change, we should focus on two given sectors. We try to talk about effect, maybe impact per impact. If it is food insecurity, how are we going to solve it? And if it is maybe water shortage, what measures have we brought in place? And I have one issue with activists and young people, and that issue is like having to talk much and doing less action. And at some point I was too much into the strikes and other things, but then I felt shy for myself because I felt I was doing a disservice for my nation.
You were being neo-colonized.
Yes, I think I don't want to be that youth that holds maybe a placard and begins moving around. Yes, that's advocacy, but we need to get our hands onto the ground. We need to act.
Thank you so much. Coming to you, Nimrod, still you stand, climate change is not a priority for Africa, and that's not what you should be looking at. What do you think should be the priorities for Africa's development? But at the same time, do you think we can be able to have that development without putting climate change?
Thank you. Just one, the reason why I asked him a question that why do we struggle with these things of climate change and protect it? He said for the better tomorrow. I want to just make it clear to even our viewers out there that Africa, when you look at the mortality rate of Africa, mostly for the children in Africa, that the first 10 reasons that cause the highest or influence the mortality challenge of Africa is not climate. Poverty, conflicts, you realize, diseases, infectious diseases, maternal mortalities, the problems that affect Africa. You realize that if we are trying to protect our tomorrow, we protect our children, but these children, they are dying of things that are not influenced by climate change. The first 10, climate change comes in.
But children are dying of hunger.
Let me tell you, poverty, hunger comes in. But I was clear that the first 10, I can mention all of the first 10. Climate change comes in the 11th. Where we can bring in is maybe poverty that causes hunger. Then that's the question, what causes hunger? It's not only climate change. There are so many things that causes hunger and a shortage of food. We cannot only reduce it to climate problems. So if African tomorrow is based on the 10 other problems, we cannot reduce the 11th problem to become the first.
I get your idea. If we're able to support our farmers to do irrigation, they wouldn't be going to the wetlands.
Exactly. There's so many things. The problem is that management gave us very little time to discuss the things of climate change. But let me tell you, where should Africans put its focus now? I think that these Europeans are funding these activists all over the world because they want to distract us to discuss issues of Africa, issues of geopolitics, the question of leadership in Africa. It is a problem. If we solve the question of leadership, we are going to solve the question of mortality rate. We are going to have the answers for our poverty. Africa, we should focus on health of our people. We should focus on the education system of Africans. We cannot continuously speak about climate change when these summits are not discussing about the question of education. We should talk about innovations. If the world is talking about artificial intelligence, where is Africa in this discussion? I would be glad to attend those summits that are talking about these issues. But last year when they were in Egypt, talking about the biggest global summit in climate, Africa is in Nairobi. The other one is coming in Middle East. There are very many. But how many are we having on geopolitics? Having about discussing the question of leadership in Africa? How many are we talking about the question of healthcare in Africa? How many are sitting to discuss about the question of innovations and giving space to science
supporting the young people?
How many are they? So to me, that's why I'm saying, as Africans, we must know what we need, and what we want is to get out of poverty, period. And if we to get out of poverty, we cannot talk about climate.
In 1.5 minutes, Richard, sorry to give you less time, but we have surely run out of time. How do we balance the two? That's the honest truth. How are we going to be able to have development but also put climate change in perspective?
We need to understand as Africa, we need to understand our background, where we are coming from and where we are going, so that we can understand the issue of climate change and the issue of development. If we arrange ourselves very well and then we harmonize and then sit together and then find a way. I will still go back to Ivan, the issue of activists and the government officials in different African countries are talking about fossil fuels and so forth. For example, stop the ECOP. I think it's the right time for the activist to listen to the government, and the government also listens to the activist. How can we sit on the table and then find solutions in a way that we do not fight each other, such that we can become enemies? Because at the end of the day, young people are coming out because they are not employed, and one of the problems why they are doing that is poverty. They are looking for finances. If someone gives them a certain amount of money, they will do it because they are getting money, and the government is not taking any responsibility. I remember I was talking to one of the MPs in East Africa. I will not mention her, but when I was in Egypt, I told her the government needs to sit with the climate activists from Uganda, because when you look at Uganda and Kenya, the most countries with climate activists and advocates globally. I told her the government needs to sit with the young people, the climate activists, and then they sit and agree and then have ways on how they can move together in terms of advising and in terms of seeing that we do not fight to cause problems to ourselves. So, Ivan, I think it's the right time for us as young people to think about development and also think about climate change, but finding ways of mitigating and adapting to what is happening.
Thank you so much. I think what I pick basically from this conversation is we need to get local solutions for this climate change issue. Not that we're just going to have summits happen, not putting in perspective what is the real problem that is affecting the development of African countries. And you want to bring about the same mitigation, have the same people on the same table and have decisions the same way. What is affecting people in Europe is not what is definitely affecting us. So we cannot really, rule on the same level. It's impossible. But also the issue of leadership. From the summit that was happening in Nairobi of recent, I saw the president of Eritrea talking about the issue of, getting local solutions. Why can't African countries find out the solution themselves? Go do research. Have Africans go do research about the issue of climate change, find the solutions themselves and get local funding, because they can. If they can be able to understand what the exact challenge that we're facing in as far as climate change is concerned, then we can get solutions, other than just getting papers and talking in summits and then talk about their achievements as leaders, which doesn't really benefit us as the people. I thank you so much for watching this show, and I believe this conversation is going to trigger you to think about this issue. We might not have had enough time to be able to deliberate on each and every matter, but I do believe that we have made you think about this issue of climate change as leaders, as citizens, to be able to know that really we cannot do away with the development, but at the same time, we need to put climate in consideration. I thank you so much for watching this show. My name is Ivan Tumukonde. See you next time.
Youth of Purpose.